So for this video, we are going to try something different. Instead of looking for images or photos or any way shapes to create our custom brushes on internet, we are going to do it real in nature. Okay, so I'm here in front of State of Art. There's a kind of a garden, a park, and I'm going to take some real piece of grass, and then I'm going upstairs and I'm scan them as a photocopy and then use them as a shape. Okay, that's it. So this is some of the grass I'm going to take and bring it with me. So these are some samples. Let's go upstairs and let's scan them. So I place them on the table just to see them and choose which one I want to scan. You can use some transparent tape if you want to stop them from moving. And these are some of the results I got, and they look fine to me. Even if there's some, dust particles, we can clean them up later on. Okay, we are back in Photoshop. I make a duplicate of one of these grass chunks with Ctrl J. Now there's a few rules if you want to make a custom brush. And the first rule is that the final shape has to be black on a white canvas, on a white background. So I'm going to add a new white layer. So I press Shift F5 for fill. I select white, and I press OK. And then I rotate this shape in order to have the stem first, the starting point here. And, in order to have it a kind of a vertical. Okay, and then I press enter, and another rule is that the final shape needs to have a little bit of white all around, because otherwise when you're going to paint with this new custom brush, you will see an art edge, basically like if you have a cutted silhouette, and you don't want that. You want the whole grass chunk visible. So what to do now? I will do this. I will add a mask first of all, because I'm going to paint out some small imperfections. And then on top of this, I will put a use saturation or a black and white, doesn't matter. I mean, you can go for the black and white and make everything darker. You see, you can increase the darkness of the yellow and greens, and normally it works fine. But anyway, what I do is to, I feel like to go with use saturation, just to go down with saturation, and then I want to control everything with a curve. And I feel like I have more, I would say, control on what I'm doing. Now, you don't have to care too much about the sharpness of what you are achieving, because anyway, we are going to make this shape a lot smaller. And this is because of the third rule. The third rule said that you can't have a brush bigger than 5,000 pixels. 5,000 pixel is the maximum size you can have as a brush in Photoshop. And you can tell if you go here, image size, you can read. Now we are inside 5,000s, but also you need to know that if you have a very big brush tip, which is so, if you keep it 3,500, I would say, the brush will basically slow down the software. So instead of painting with a good frame rate, it will take a few seconds for the stroke to appears on your screen, and you don't want that. And we need a very small brush for this, in this case anyway, because we are going to paint some brush silhouette. So in the end, we are going to make it smaller anyway. So now I'm going back here on the mask, and I just want to paint black the mask where I see some imperfections. And you can do a very quick job. It doesn't matter if you miss something, they will probably disappear when we are going to make this a lot smaller. And even if this area here is not completely black, I mean, sometimes you don't care. because again, it's going to be so small, it's not going to be visible. So now that we have something that we can use, we can just press Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E to make one layer only. Okay, this is how to merge everything in one layer without losing all your existing layers. Ctrl-Alt-Shift-E. And then we can make this smaller, or we can even, normally what I do is I duplicate this layer into a new file. So I know that I don't touch the original one, and I'm cropping it as much as I can. Okay, so close to the brush, to the shape bounding box, I would say. Here we go. And then image size, and here we can choose the size, the real size of our brush. And I can go with something like 1000 on the bigger size, and we press OK. And so this is the final brush. It's even bigger than what we need, but anyway, now that we have a black shape on a white background and we have a little bit of white all around, we can go here, edit the fine brush preset, and basically if you have done everything in the right way, you get this panel. You don't get this panel, and you don't get the option, the fine brush preset, if the canvas is bigger than 5000 pixels, basically. So if you get that one, you're fine. And now this will be our grass single stroke. So this is not the final brush, okay? This is just one single stroke for the brush, okay? Don't misunderstand what you're doing. Even if it's telling you brush name, this is not a real, this is not the final brush, I would say. This is just one single stroke. We are going to use this single stroke to create the final brush. So we press OK. And now you see, immediately you get the same shape as a brush, as you can see. But if you paint with the brush, or so-called brush, as you can see, you get something which is not very useful because it is the same shape repeated over and over. So let's see now how to go from this single stroke to the final brush and how to use it. Remember that you can also make a new brush tip with the shape you just created, and you can make a new file, for example, and pick something like 3000 with a white background. And now in an empty layer, I just paint a black shape and I convert this to a smart object. And the reason for this is that I can now duplicate and have a bunch of them. And maybe one of them, I will flip it, rotate a little bit, and then I can use an option here into the edit panel, Puppet Warp, which is very cool because it allows you to show a mesh. As you can see here, I zoom in a little bit. The mesh is created on top of your layer, and you can also decide the density of the mesh. So if you want more points, fewer points, or a normal node, and then you can click on the mesh to add some pins, as you can see here, and you can then select one of the pin to basically rotate and deform your original shape. And this is pretty cool because allow you to generate different drawings, and when you click on apply, it will be applied. But because you have a smart object, the Puppet Warp works as a smart filter, so you can always go back and modify it. And if you press Ctrl T, because maybe you want to scale it down, the smart filters are not visible for the moment, but then when you press enter, they will go back and be visible. Now I can just select another type of brush to delete a few details from this. And as you can see, I have a new shape and I can go on how many times I want. Maybe just not with one single shape, but I can use a few of the ones I scanned just to create a few like differences. But anyway, we can go on, we can go over and over with this method. We can mask this maybe, and then we can again go to image, sorry, edit, puppet warp, and we can blend, we can, you know, distort this. As you can see. And now, if you like what you see, again, edit, define brush preset, and you have something new, which comes from an original shape. See? Now with this tip, we can create the proper brush. So now that we have a new brush tip, we can hide all the layers we have down there because we don't need them anymore. And in a new empty layer, we can start creating, we can start testing the new brush, because for now it's just a single tip, okay, as you can see. So what to do? We open the brush settings panel. Okay, it's here, or maybe it's in Windows, brush settings, or you can press F5 on the keyboard. Anyway, once you have done your single tip, you will find it somewhere here. There we go. Here it is. And then in this panel here, you can choose basic settings like the size, like the rotation of the tip, like the roundness, so basically how much is kind of squeezed, and we can flip the tip up and down, and we can also increase the spacing, because normally what you see as a single brush stroke, for example, when we have something like this, I mean, you can see the line, but actually is nothing more than thousands of single dots very close to each other because the spacing is pretty low. Now, you don't need to go to 1% to have single line. You can keep it like also like 5%. And the lower the spacing number is, the slower the software will be. So, you know, keep this in mind. Anyway, let's go back to the shape we created, which is somewhere here. I lost it. We have too many. Here we go. And then I click on Shape Dynamics. Now, Shape Dynamics panel will basically modify with some randomness the shape, the starting tip shape we have. So, for example, size jitter will change randomly the scale of your tip. So now if I just paint a little bit, you see some of the tips are smaller and some of the tips are bigger. And you can choose a control to do so. So for example, here you can choose pen pressure, which means that the size of the stroke depends on how much you press with the pen. And basically it's this option. Okay, so if you turn this off, you can go back here and, you know, control this with something else, or you can also keep it off. So it will let, you know, this to be completely random. Now we have a minimum diameter of this kind of randomness for the size. And that's very useful because let's say that you keep, I don't know, 500 pixels as the maximum size for your brush, a minimum diameter of 0%, which means that some of the tip will be 0 pixels, okay? But for example, if you have 50%, then some of them will be 250, and some other will be 300, 400, and some of them will be 500. So basically, this is the minimum diameter which is they're going to be, okay? So we are going from 250 to 500 in this case. And then we have the angle jitter, which is the same thing, but for the angle, for the rotation. So you see, you can basically change each single tip rotation. And we can just test it now here. If we increase this too much, you see, some of them will be basically looking down, and this is not something we want in this case. So the angle jitter could be very, very minimal, could be like 5%. And the roundness jitter in this case is the height of each tip, because you see, if I put this to 100%, some of them will be very like squashed, and will be very like squeezed down. And this is not something I want, so I don't want it too much, okay? And so let me do this. And we have also here minimum roundness, okay? So again, as the minimum diameter, it decide how the minimum value for the roundness. 50% is fine to me right now, okay? And then we have the flip X jitter and the flip Y jitter. Now, I don't touch the Y jitter because otherwise some of the tips will be upside down. I don't care about that. In this case, I will care just about the X jitter. Some of them will be basically, I see, flipped on the vertical axis, which is exactly what I want, just to have a little bit more of randomization, as you can see here, okay? And then what we have here is the scattering. The next section here is scattering, which is very cool, because if you see now, if I go up with the spacing, okay, you will see that now I'm painting, and a stroke will appear every now and then, depending on the spacing. If I decrease the spacing, they will be closer together, and so on. But anyway, what to do? We can increase the scatter. And so basically the scatter will move each tip, each stroke from the original line I'm painting, okay? So if I'm painting a line like this, they will be completely on the line. They will follow the line. But if I increase the scatter, they will move around the line, you see, in a more kind of random way. And of course, you don't want to exaggerate in this case, because you don't want to have like flying grass chunks, but a little bit it's good, because allow you to generate something kind of a more dynamic, I would say. The count is the number of strokes, of single strokes we can paint each time we paint one stroke, okay? So now we have count 1, which means we click once, we get one stroke, but instead of 1, we can have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as much as you want. So every time now I paint, I get 5 of them, basically. And the count jitter is the percentage of how many how many tips will basically appears every time I paint one tip. So if I have 50%, I will take this number, and I can go higher and lower that number by 50%. So for example, if I have, I don't know, 4, and this is 50%, every time I paint, I have the chance to get 50% more of tips, of strokes, so 6 in total, because 50% of 4 is 2. So I can go from 2 to 6 tips or strokes every time I paint, okay? And it's a nice way to increase the randomness, I would say, of what you're doing, okay? And then we can also have, for now, we can have transfer, which is the opacity. And I don't want to control the opacity because of the pen pressure, but I want to control the opacity because of the jitter, because of the randomness here, okay? So if I have, I don't know, 100%, some of them will be completely visible, some of them will be opaque. And as you can see now, I have a better mask, kind of more realistic, because, you know, some of the strokes will be kind of opaque and some of them will be transparent. And that's pretty cool, okay? And so this is what you can start with, and you can do some tests. You can do some, you know, anyway, trial and errors to see what you like the most. Once you find something that you like, you don't have to lose it, okay? Because now if Photoshop for some reason crashes, you will lose everything you have done here. So how to save your settings here? You need to make a new brush. So this is the only way to make an actual brush, okay? This is different from the previous create brush shape. This is the real brush. So I'm going to call this one SOA, I don't know, grass tip 01. And I will include the tool settings. Basically, I will include this as a tool. A tool is different than a brush because when you load a tool, it will load also the color, or, you know, the size, the actual size you were using when you save it. And you can also do it from here, capture brush size in preset. So I press OK. And now I can close Photoshop, and, you know, I don't care, this brush is saved. And so I can go back here on my PSD file in the group where I have the grass here. You see, I have a group, and this mask on the group would basically is basically cutting perfectly the mask there. And so I can zoom in, and I can, with a white color, I can select mask, and I can start painting. Oops, sorry, white. Yeah, and if you have some colors, the moment you change the tool and you put a brush, it could change. And also if you select the mask, they could change either. So now I'm painting, see, and it's working. So the idea is to create different brushes depending on the area we want to paint. And also the advice I can give you is to not paint with the same size every time, because otherwise you would see the shape, the original shape, over and over. So try to change a little bit the scattering, or the, I don't know, the angle jitter, the roundness, the size, and try to change also the shape size. So you don't have the same result everywhere. You see here I'm painting some very tall grass, and then I'm kind of following, you know, the original photo, because here we have some tall grass, here we have some cut grass. So maybe here we need another type of tip shape. And when I'm looking from far away now, it's a lot better than before. Okay, so this is the way you can create a brush, a custom brush. Now it's your turn. You have my images, my scanned images in the zip file. You can open one of them and create your own brush and try to paint with your own brush this foreground grass mask.